Hello YouTube, Travis here again, and today we are going to be taking a look at something that I've been wanting to start for a while, but I didn't really know how to do it, and if I would have just started it sooner, we would have been able to be very far. But anyways, keep in mind, this is what I'm going to do with this video. I'm going to find 10 games on the internet, then I'm going to make another one of these videos. This is not going to be the only video that's like this, but instead what it's going to be is it's like I find 10 videos, make a video about it, and then find another 10 videos, eventually until we cover every single video game known to exist. Okay, so let's get started. Pretty self-explanatory. Okay, so the first game that I have on this list is Chrono Trigger. Okay, if you've never... Okay, obviously people have heard of Chrono Trigger, but if you haven't played Chrono Trigger, here's why you should play it. Okay, it's a Japanese RPG, obviously. I mean, even if you haven't played it, you should at least know Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger is a game that, before it was developed, there was already all this hype about the excitement of when it was being developed. They got 3 major people. There was the creator of Final Fantasy, the creator of Dragon Age, and Akira, the guy who pretty much illustrated Dragon Ball Z, and all the other people that helped out making the game, the music, and everybody was special in their own way. But anyways, this is what Chrono Trigger is about in a nutshell. I don't want to spoil too much of it if you haven't played it, but it's pretty much Dragon Ball Z, but essentially characters look like Dragon Ball Z. And as you play the game, you time travel, you find all these different bosses, the music's awesome, different attacks, team attacks, different items you can get, new game plus, multiple endings. Let's see what else is there. You get to fight this giant, you fight aliens, sort of, later on. And something devours the world if it's not stopped in a certain amount of time. And it's pretty cool because, at the end of the game, just before you go to fight it, it leads up. It's about to happen 5 seconds before, but you just go there. I think you get there before it does. And then once it realizes you're there, you essentially are there to stop it, obviously, and win. But if you haven't played Chrono Trigger, you should totally play it. The second game on this list that you should play is Golden Sun 1. Okay, Golden Sun 1 was released for the GBA, the Game Boy Advance. Fun fact about Golden Sun 1 and 2. Golden Sun 1 and 2 were supposed to be one game, and they were supposed to be released on the N64. Now, Golden Sun 1 you can play as 4 characters. There is Garrett, Isaac is the main character, Isaac, Garrett, Ivan, and Maya. I thought it was Mia, like M-I-A, but it's Maya. So anyways, what's really funny, really cool about Golden Sun is that as you play the game progresses in a point of view where you have what is known as elements. You have Venus, Jupiter, Mercury, and Mars. Now, Venus is Earth, and at least in the game anyways. Mercury is water, Mars is fire, and Jupiter is wind. Now, this is what's really interesting. Golden Sun does something very interesting that I haven't really seen too many games utilize. You can level grind in Golden Sun 1 and 2 and 3. However, what's really interesting is the game designers got really clever. There's what is known as Psynergy, which is actually supposed to be the main energy, the main magic that your characters get, and you can do various things on the world map. You can move stuff, and you can pick objects up. You can go into dungeons, find these really cool items, or even get stone tablets. You get what is known as Donjis. I believe that's how they pronounce it. D-J-I-N-N. Donji? Donjin? Or something like that? I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. But anyways, so what ends up happening is if you play those games, you will come to find out that your characters are capable of... You can take advantage of so many different things. The maps are cool, the story's awesome. Motoi Sakuraba did the music for all the Golden Sun games, and man, he's done a really good job with the games. A lot of cool things could be said about Golden Sun 1 and 2. However, Golden Sun 1, there is... I'm trying to think. Okay, so you could have your individual stats for every character, but then, they all have their own Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and Yeah, they have their own Jupiter, Mars, and Mercury stats. So, like, for example, like, if you're fighting like a character that uses Synergy, for example, it's possible that even though your characters might be like ridiculously over-leveled, their elemental defenses could be so low that they can still die very fast, which is actually really interesting because there's actually a couple moments in Golden Sun 1 and 2 where you'll actually find that out, like, really interesting. You can be at, like, level 99, and then it'll be, like, one boss can do, like, one attack everybody, and still do, like, half your life for some reason. It's really clever, because usually when you think of games that are low, you over-level your characters, like, hypothetically, you can't die very easily because your stats all around are pretty much immortalized. So your characters have more resistance and everything, so they can't die easily. But in this case, you can. So it'd be really interesting. So you have physical attacks, you have special attacks, Synergy in this case. And it's cool how that works. So that's just Golden Sun 1. Another game that you gotta play is obviously the sequel to Golden Sun 1 is Golden Sun 2. Golden Sun 1 Golden Sun 1 is a long game, sort of. And then when you play Golden Sun 2, which is actually, like, I think it was like 3 times longer than Golden Sun 1, it's, the characters that were from Golden Sun 1, the game gives you a tremendous backstory. I mean, the game explains itself very well. It doesn't leave any detail unturned. And, well, actually, that was probably one of the things that some people complained about Golden Sun 1 was that you couldn't, like, some of the story, like, I'm not sure if you could skip it the first playthrough, but, the story was long. Like, literally, you literally would be shocked that the story to Golden Sun was like so long. It was like probably people complained that the story was really long, but it's actually really good though. A lot of flashbacks, a lot of like every individual character gets their own story, and yeah, they're all represented in their own way, all related somehow, but still friends, needless to say. But at the same time, though, there's plot twists everywhere. In Golden Sun 2, you actually play as 4 more characters, so there's a total of 8. But you don't get your main characters until, like, from Golden Sun 1 all the way until the end of Golden Sun 1, or Golden Sun 2. So you play as Felix, you can get Jenna, Sheba, Pierre, and then as soon as, and again, it's pretty much the continuation of Golden Sun 1. And then once you do that, you find out that the events of Golden Sun 1 were, again, plot twist. There was a lot of story that the game threw you. It's like if you played Tales of Symphonia. The game throws all the story at you, and then eventually you find out most of it's a lie. Sort of. Won't spoil how it goes down, but it's pretty cool how that happens. If you haven't played Golden Sun, you should definitely play it, though. Awesome series. So, the 4th game we should talk about is Star Ocean. Star Ocean 1 for the PSP and the Super Famicom. Okay, now, obviously a remake, it can still be counted as a different game, but really more the same thing. But let's go with the original PSP version of Star Ocean. Okay, if you haven't played Star Ocean, allow me to explain something. Star Ocean... Well, actually, let's go with the Super Famicom version. The Super Famicom version of Star Ocean was released back in around the early 90s. The game was made by what is known as Team Wolf. Think of it like this. When Tales of Fantasia came out, that was made by Namco, the same company that made Galaga, Mappyland, Pac-Man, and the Atari 20, not the Atari 2600, but the arcade. I want to know if that was Miss Pac-Man that they made too. That Namco. So, anyways, Namco stated that when they made Tales of Fantasia, they wanted a sci-fi adventure game. But eventually, what ended up happening was, when Tales of Fantasia came out, it was a great game, but knowing Asia, they usually have high expectations for specific games. Well, when Star Ocean came out, this is when, and believe me, this is going to get a little confusing, so kind of pay attention a little bit. Okay, so you have 3 things here. You have Team Wolf. I mean, we're not talking about Star Fox, like Team Wolf. We're talking about Team Wolf, like the team. if you follow the Tales series, at one point there was what was known as two teams, Team Silvera and Team Destiny. But eventually there was a third one, and so what ended up happening was, because people in Asia usually have high expectations, and I guess they weren't really pressured by anybody, but they just felt they could do better. So some of the members actually discussed the project of Tales of Fantasia after they finished it, and they thought they could do better. So knowing that, and Tales of Fantasia does deal a little bit with time traveling, but it's not like Star Ocean does, and Star Trek and Star Wars, but think of it like this. Star Trek, if you don't know, was a series that, I'm sure we all know what Star Trek is, whether you watch the episodes or not, but let me give you a little rundown. You know, it was pretty much like the humans, Enterprise, you know, characters like Spock and Captain Kirk, you know, they would travel across the universe, and they would go to all these different planets that no one knew existed, and they would land there, and they would just interact with the locals, and help people out, and, you know, it was pretty cool, like learning all the science fiction, you know, and applying it to real life could be true too. What else is out there we don't know? Nobody knows. The Star Ocean. But, you know, but obviously, if you play the original Super Famicom version of Star Ocean, what's really interesting is you find out that the same people that was under Team Wolf was under the influence of Tales of Fantasia, because Tales of Fantasia, as soon as you start playing Star Ocean, you will realize that the game opens up. Literally, the game is Star Ocean. It is literally Tales of Fantasia. That is the first game that game will remind you when it starts up. It's Tales of Fantasia. And so what ends up happening is Star Ocean later on was regarded as one of the best games of all time, that it had 4 sequels, and I don't know how many remakes. I know I'm playing through the PSP version. What a difference. Let me tell you what a difference that game is. I recommend playing it through both versions. However, if you're going to play the original Super Famicom version on an emulator, be warned, depending on what, I think it was Z-SNES, if I'm not mistaken, it crashes randomly about after you start running around on the world map. The music will start cutting randomly sometimes. That's usually the first indication that the game's going to crash at some point. But if there is any way to fix that, I would play it on a different emulator. I'm not sure exactly which one would work, which one would be in your best interest, but as long as the game doesn't crash. I mean, I actually completed it with Z-SNES. It was just, I think it crashed only like 13 times total from start to finish. I only played it once on the Super Famicom with an English translated patch, and it was probably it was still regarded as one of the best games I've ever played. It's got plot twists. It's literally one of the best games I've ever played. You know, Tales and in the Tales series too. Huge shout out to the Tales series if you've never played that either. That's another great series. Alright, so Star. Let's go to another game. Tales of Vesperia, the PS3 version. Okay, now chances are you've probably heard of Tales of Vesperia for the Xbox 360. However, there was another version of Tales of Vesperia which was actually released outside of, no, it was not released outside of Japan. It was called Tales of Vesperia for the PS3. Keep in mind, think of it like this. The PS3 is region locked, or region free, sorry, not region locked. I don't know what I was thinking of for a second. So, if you want a game that's fun, and believe me, I'll translate the game if you want it in English, I highly recommend getting this game. It's in Japanese, there is an English patch for the game, but you have to, I believe you have to mod your PS3, like the firmware down to 3.55, something to do with that. And then while you're at it, you put the game's ISO, which is the game itself, onto the hard drive, and then you can put the patch on it, and then you can load it. Or I think I've seen people put the patch on, but then they just put a disc in and it loads just fine. Something to do with like redirecting the game, but you don't have to save the patch to the actual Blu-ray disc, which I highly recommend you don't do, because that would just kind of ruin the file. But anyways, so Tales of Vesperia, if you've ever played the Tales series, you'll notice two different patterns. Namco likes to either remake some of the Tales games, or they'll release a game, but some of it's not finished, but the game itself is finished, but they forgot to put like extra content. Another good example is Tales of Symphonia. Tales of Symphonia for the GameCube, the English version was great, and so was the Japanese version on the GameCube. But the problem is, though, it didn't have all the mystic arts, it didn't have some of the boss battles. But the PS2 version came out, which later the PS3 version came out, and it's still 30 frames per second according to some people, and I still have both versions. And ironically, even though it was on the PS3 as well, you know, what was really funny though was the game had all that extra content in it, and it was in English after somebody translated it. And I'm going to be translating it again because I've noticed some people left some content out. But my point is, it's kind of like the same thing. You know, if you play the Xbox 360 version, one of the bosses mentions that there's this power coming from what is known as the Spiral Draco. However, in the Xbox 360 version, there was no Spiral Draco, but it wasn't until the PS3 version that there was a super boss called the Spiral Draco, which is found in a dungeon that doesn't even exist in Tales of Vesperia, and only in the PS3 version, if that makes sense. If you're confused about anything, just let me know. But to make a long story short, Tales of Vesperia was completed on the PS3 version. You can get the PS3 version for $30, brand new, never opened, because so many people bought the original version, and I bought the original version. I think I spent like almost $100 on it just to import it, because this is way before I started realizing that you could just import games for a cheap price, like if you're willing to wait, because Japanese games, over time, they drop in price. They're not price gouging like some people do, which is actually very shocking to me when I grew up finding that out. Another thing that I need to point out is, if you've ever played... Okay, this is another game, but huge shout out to Namco Bandai for making another Tales game that we got to talk about is number 6, Tales of Rebirth. Tales of Rebirth was a game that was released back in... right around the time when Tales of Symphonia was released for the PS... for the GameCube. There was an English magazine that mentioned that there was a game called Tales of Rebirth, or it mentioned that Namco filed a trademark for the game, meaning that they own rights to it. So that was a dead giveaway that they were making another game. Problem is, though, after that, no one ever mentioned Tales of Rebirth again. Upon further inspection on GameFAQs, a lot of people found out that the game was released outside Japan, and there was people talking about it all around the world, probably. Despite the fact the game was never localized, nobody knows why it wasn't localized, and being that I've translated the game in English, and I've played it myself, like I think 3 times now, for the PS2, but really I recommend the PSP version because it's got extra stuff in it. Again, the same thing I said about Tales of Symphonia, Tales of Vesperia, that's the same pattern for Tales of Rebirth. There's extra stuff in the game, but it's not too much different. But anyways, what ends up happening is, the game's all in Japanese, sure, but it's another great game that, probably one of the greatest games I've ever played. The music is just really uplifting. Like, it's really mysterious and nostalgic in a way that, you know, every game is special in its own way, but after playing Tales of Rebirth, it made me look at things I've never felt and seen before in a video game. Like, it made me realize that there are indeed other things out there that we can feel when we play video games. So like, what I'm saying is, if you want like a new experience, like, I mean, it isn't like, it didn't invent everything. It's not 100% different from a lot of games. I mean, there are some things that it does recycle from, like you've probably seen in other games, like, you know, you see characters using swords and upgrading them, buying equipment, buying items, obviously. But the music and the story, you can actually really learn something from that game. It's pretty much that racism, sexism, and all around segregation is just evil, and that humans have an evil force in their hearts and good in them too, and if you sit there and hate people, then bad things happen. So that's pretty much what Tales of Rebirth taught me, is that, you know, any problem can be overcome if you have the right ideas. But anyways, that's another game for another time, but I'll leave it to that. But oh god, what is it, number 7 are we at? Okay, let's go with number 7. Alright, so there's a game called Criminal Girls for the PSP and the PS Vita. The game was localized, but it was sort of heavily censored in the PS. It deals with a lot of sexual themes. I mean, it's not like completely sexual, but the goal is, like, you know, like, there's like these 7 girls that get sent to hell for like deadly sins and all that, and they're given a shot at another chance. However, what's really interesting, in order to give these girls a second chance, they have to pass an ordeal. They have to climb this tower, and eventually once they get to the top, and after they pass certain ordeals throughout the dungeons, they can be teleported back to the dimension where they were living their lives, and they will be able to resume it. However, what's really interesting, though, is the game is not easy, and I'm still playing the game right now. If you want to check out a walkthrough on YouTube, it's I'll link it to you, the PSP version. However, the PS Vita version actually has extra stuff in it. And there's a sequel that's coming out within the next 4 days. Actually, no, it's coming out on the 26th. It's actually coming out on Thanksgiving in the United States. What a shock. I was waiting. I didn't even know that game was even getting a sequel. But, in Criminal Girls, I mean, it's, think of it like this. It's a Japanese game. It's got, there's a couple levels in it in particular, like, that really, like, literally, I mean, you could literally learn something from that game. I mean, aside from the sexual material that I'm sure some people were turned off by and they didn't really like it. Some people liked it. Me personally, I really didn't care for it. I mean, you know, I don't really care if the game, I mean, I'm not offended by anything, you know. If I play a game that has sex in it, or, I mean, hypothetically, you know, I wouldn't really, it wouldn't make me want to stop playing it, or, you know, it really wouldn't, you know, I'd still play it. But my point is, you know, there's games out there that, you know, I mean, that's why they're rated M or rated D in Japan. Like, if it's got a lot of sexual content, then there's probably something that you should note about it. But my point is, the game is in Japanese. The game was localized in English, but they kind of actually left stuff out. So I'm translating the Japanese version of both versions, and I'm going to be doing the same thing with the second game when it comes out, because there's some things that they left out or they changed, censored, and so I want people to know, like, what's really going on here if they're a fan of the series. Funny story, I actually did a full walkthrough way before the game was even coming out. I didn't even know they were even remaking it for the PSP as well. It's weird how that works, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, you find a game that most people have never heard of that existed for like 5 years almost, and you're like, huh, that's a fun game. You sit down, you play it, and then you tell other people about it, and then someone else, and then they decide to localize it, which is awesome. Not sure how that worked, but I guess they just did. But anyways, you know, the music, and there's like certain levels, like for example, this is why I love Asia's culture, like just the fact that they know how to be different than everybody else. They know like who they are. Like what I'm saying is, you know, what makes Asia like a really cool place is like, you know, they take their culture and they stick with it. But at the same time though, they do it in a way that, you know, makes everybody happy. That's why a lot of people love Asia. Because it gives you that feeling. You like you fall in love with their culture. You don't know how to explain it. You don't know why, and it's like you just want to keep playing it. So you play games that are like that and hope of being able to figure this out, why the culture is the way it is. And you know, there's one level, I think it was called Some Classroom Memory at 16 o'clock. Is the level? It's the second last dungeon before the final one, and I'm not talking about the 2 optional dungeons that you progress through to the top of the tower. But what's really interesting though is once you get to that level though, it's supposed to be like, this is when you find out that all the characters that you have in the game, they're all related somehow. The game does not explain this at the beginning of the game, but all the characters are all related somehow, sort of. You know, because they all go to the same school, but it's not like their memory was completely erased or anything like that. Like they couldn't remember who they were and all that other. They just didn't really realize that, hey, you know, we went to school together. I mean, that's how it was. But you know, the music, I mean, it really sets the stage for the whole thing. I mean, this game, if you have not played it, check it out. It's in Japanese, but it's pretty straightforward. I'm dead serious. I mean, level grind when you can, because you don't really want to do like a low level challenge, because the bosses and characters get really aggressive later on. They'll just kill you instantly if you don't have the right stats and stuff like that. But it's a fun game. I'll let you know like what it looks like if you want to check it out. But number 8, if you are interested, there's another game called, I'm trying to think what it was called. What was it? Tales of Destiny Director's Cut. Yeah, there's another game on the PS2, going back to the Tales series. There's a game called Tales of Destiny Director's Cut. It's a remake of the original PS1 game, Tales of Destiny, for the PS1 or PSX over in Japan. So anyways, Tales of Destiny pretty much is a really cool game. It was the second Tales game that was made. It was technically the first 3D, but it was still 2D sort of like they essentially brought the game to life, more to life than Tales of Fantasia. And then later on, when Tales of Fantasia got a remake in Japan, well, actually, you know what? I think they remade Tales of Fantasia. No, wait, no, Tales of Destiny came out in 1998, didn't it? Oh, actually, no, I gotta look this up. The original Tales of Destiny came out, but anyways, the remake came out in 2006, and it was never localized. Well, first of all, there was two versions of the game. There was Tales of Destiny for the PS2, and then there was another one called Tales of Destiny, the Director's Cut, the Platinum Edition. You can get this for $30, 3,000 yen. It's pretty cheap. Japanese games are pretty cheap. Not to mention, you can buy your stuff used. It will come with everything, and it's in really good condition. No scratches, nothing. They literally take care of their stuff. That's what I love about Asia. They know exactly how to give you a good deal, and they're fair about it, and that's what they want. They literally want to help you out. Sure, it might suck. You have to wait like a while before stuff comes to you in the mail, but I mean, there's been a package I was waiting for almost 2 months from Japan, but it's not a scam. It's coming, but it's like, man, wonder what it's gonna be here. But yeah, it's another great series. You should check it out. The Tales series. All the Tales games are awesome. I'll update you on that once I get more time. But right now, let's just go with that. Tales of Destiny, you play as, I think it's like 10 characters, and the game has got difficulties, and it's a complete remake of the original. I mean, the original game was pretty colorful too, but the remake, oh man, they really changed a lot of stuff in the remake. You'll love the remake more than the original. It's just insane what they changed. It's another example of a game that, if you take your time and you put work into it, you can do anything. Anything's possible. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so there's another game called Growlancer. Growlancer. This whole series, I recommend all 6 games. But let's talk about just a couple of them right now. And believe me, we'll come back to the whole series, because this is the whole series I want to recommend you. Okay, so there's number 2 was released back. Oh jeez. It was made by CareerSoft and was published by Atlas, the same company that made the Persona series. Like Shin Megami Tensei. And I have to play that series still, which is actually... There's way too many video games. Just put it that way. I think they said there's at least 15 trillion video games that are said to exist, and that's including indie games and, whatever you want to consider a video game. There's way too many video games. But that's why I'm here on YouTube, to find these games for you so that way you can play them. Okay, so, again, the whole series is awesome, but and one thing that got me into the Growlancer series is it's strikingly familiar to Fire Emblem, but it's a lot harder and more realistic. Like, for example, if your characters have armor that is like really heavy, they'll walk really slow. So it's actually really cool how the game becomes realistic. And the game is actually difficult. Some of these games are so damn difficult. Sorry if that offends anybody, I don't mean to offend people, but it's like, it's out there. It's difficult hard. Like, some of the games, 4 is probably the hardest one I've played so far, but then again, I think 2 actually had its moments. 1 is probably difficult. I haven't played it all the way through yet. Here's the thing. Okay, so 2 actually has a really plot twist story, and the game was localized. 1 and 6 were never localized. However, there are English patches for them. 1 is a prequel to 2. The whole game... So, if you play Growlancer 2, or Growlancer 1, let's just say, the whole game is a prequel to number 2, up until the second half of Growlancer 2, and then when the events of Growlancer 1 are over with, because they take place on the same continent, but never at the same time, the main character from the first game, who is actually a silent protagonist, joins you in your quest to save the world, save the continent. Which is weird, because the first game was all about trying to find this mythical power, destroy it, or seal it away. But then at the same time, though, later on they find out that they didn't completely destroy it, so they have to go back and destroy it. So it's pretty cool because, and then there's other characters, there's multiple stories going on at once, and they all tie into each other. It's like war, you know what I mean? One guy's trying to start crap and conquer, and then there's this other guy who's trying to divide and conquer for his own reasons, and eventually, they team up, and then they screw each other over, and then eventually, you know what I mean? It's like that. It's like, it's so cool how you can make a game with so many different things going on at once, and eventually when that story ends, another one resumes. It's really cool. You know, what you come up with, endless possibilities. So, in Growlancer, so yeah, 2 is pretty emotional too. It's actually a game that actually made me cry for the first time in my life. I mean, in a video game. Even though Fire Emblem 7 was the first game to do that to me, but that was before I found out that you could save Nini and you don't have to have her die at the end of the game, or she goes away. But it's kind of weird how a game can make someone cry, someone emotional like that, but yeah, that is weird. Okay, so let's talk about 10, the 10th game. The 10th game that I would recommend that you play is Fire Emblem 6, Fire Emblem Fuin no Tsurugi, which is the Binding Blade, or the Sword of Seals, mostly Sword of Seals. Okay, if you played Super Smash Bros. Melee, chances are you've heard of Roy and Marth, but chances are you've never played the game that they were from, because this game was never localized. Keep in mind, Fire Emblem, I recommend every Fire Emblem game, including the first ones. There's 15 Fire Emblem games that essentially exist, if I'm not mistaken. Fire Emblem, I gotta get the new ones for the 3DS. They look really cool, and I'm sure somebody will tell me, yeah, get them, because they're fun. But Fire Emblem 6 is probably my favorite one at the moment. You can play as almost 100 different characters. Actually, Fire Emblem, they're all great games if you haven't played the Fire Emblem series. Think of it like this. Roy, Fire Emblem 6 is a difficult game. It is. But if you play that game, it's like a game of advanced chess if you've never played, like, Advanced Wars, or if you've never played Growlands, or Intelligent Systems is the one that made that series, the same people that made, wait, hold on, was it Camelot? Did Intelligent Systems become Camelot? Are they the same people that made the Golden Sun series? And then they made Paper Mario Thousand Year Door and all those other good games. Well, look, I gotta look that up. I'm not sure if Camelot is Intelligent Systems or vice versa. But my point is, Intelligent Systems made Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, Paper Mario, like the original N64 one. There is a lot of games that you've probably heard of by Intelligent Systems. They made Toadstool Tour, the Mario Sports Series, Mario Tennis, Mario Golf, Mario Soccer. I mean, they pretty much made a lot of Nintendo sports games, essentially. My point is, I would highly recommend the Fire Emblem series in general to you. Fire Emblem 6 is my favorite, and it comes close between Fire Emblem 9 and 10, which is Fire Emblem, the one with Ike, and then the sequel, which is Radiant Dawn and the Goddess of Dawn, or the Goddess of Dawn. And there is, what else is there? Fire Emblem 9, Path of Radiance, or Radiant Dawn. Path of Radiance is another fun game, or the what is it called? The Medallion of Blue Flame in Japanese, or something like that. And like Fire Emblem 6, well, it's another game that will make you see things that you've never seen before in a video game. And it's a game that, the music is so cool that even though the game was made back in 2001, you'll really wish that you'll just tell yourself that age doesn't mean anything, because it'll make you feel better. It's a game that, I sat down, I played it for my first time, and I looked at the age. I mean, I don't think age really means anything. But we need people to keep history alive, because people don't know that these games exist if they've never played them, especially if they've never been released outside of Japan. I actually got a Japanese copy of the game with the box art. Back in the day, I spent $80 on it. Got it in the mail. Still have it to this day. And now you can get it for like $20 on eBay. So my point is, Fire Emblem 6 is a hard game, but it's fun though. So, you should comment, rate, subscribe, favorite, share this video with people. And keep in mind, this is not the only top 10 list I'll be making, but these are just 10 games that I recommend to you in great detail. And I'm sorry if I'm not showing any gameplay footage right now. I will get that. But right now, I just want to talk about these games. Play these games. They are fun.